Welcome to Learning Life Skills Together. This is our weekly community Zoom meeting where our guests help us to go deeper into the 4 life skills and open up a huge array of chances to practice them. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Learning Life Skills Together weekly Zoom meeting number 30. Nice round number. And so, as always, we're going to begin with a practice. And so this is a very simple practice. You could say that it is a practice of grounding. And so we're going to ground ourselves using the earth, using the fact that there is gravity here on the earth. So if you'd like, you could close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that. If that's not comfortable, don't close your eyes. But you could bring your attention into your body and where it's touching down. Maybe you're standing. Maybe you're sitting. Maybe you're lying down. Maybe you're even walking. However that is, the earth, gravity is holding you. You're not going to float off. So you might notice how that feels in your body. Is it possible to feel the pressure on your soles of your feet if you're sitting with your feet on the floor or if you're standing? Maybe if you're sitting, you feel the pressure on your buttocks and your thighs. Maybe you feel your back against a chair. If you're lying down, maybe there's a whole long surface of your body that's in contact with gravity and ultimately with the ground. So just bringing your attention to that. And as you notice, you might notice if you're taking advantage of this fact. Often we're putting in effort that is extra. If we're sitting or lying or standing, most of the work can be done for us by gravity. If we can allow ourselves to be held by the earth, as it were. So just checking in to see how it is, to see if you're allowing yourself to be held. Maybe you need to make some adjustments to make that holding easier for the earth and easier for you. Just seeing if it's possible to come to a little more rest. You might even notice your breathing. And so you can notice how it is when you breathe in your body, how this resting with gravity feels, and how it feels when you breathe out. Sometimes breathing out can help us come a little more into that lack of effort, that letting gravity hold us. And if your eyes have been closed, you could open them. and you've been paying attention to how you feel in your body. So I can't ask the audience since we're being recorded here, but I can ask my guest, Chelsea, how she's doing.
Hi, I'm feeling great now. Thank you, Don. I
Okay.
appreciate that. I've had a very busy morning. We've been on the go all morning. I've was a little stressed this morning, so being able to just kind of gather myself and really kind of feel where I am with things, take some deep breaths. It's a good, it's a good thing. It's a good start. So,
All right. So, yeah, I needed that myself. Uh, sometimes I just get in touch with gravity. It's an easy thing to do, really. And just for a few seconds, just check in. Oh, am I holding myself up, or or could I let the earth do it for me? Could I be
yeah.
grounded, you know?
Yeah, multiple times
And
a day, I think I have to check in with myself and do a few deep breaths. And like you kind of said, just kind of take an inventory of like, how am I feeling? What's going on in my body? What's going on in my mind? Like, how really am I feeling? Where am I holding some of that tension? It just
yeah.
kind of helps with figuring out where I can let some things go.
And this is the centerpiece of learning life skills together, is that there are very, very simple things we can do to help ourselves come right into reality, right into how things really are. And when we know that, then we can actually get some things done. We can work, we can figure things out.
Absolutely.
And yeah. And so you and I have worked and figured things out together before. We about ten meetings back we met, and we had met before that, I think on a radio show, if I'm not mistaken. We did
Yeah,
that.
so that's where I first met you,
Yes.
John.
Yeah.
You were a guest on, I have a radio show that I co-host called Let's Talk About It, in Westchester. And so, you were on our show. And I
Yeah.
remember learning about learning life skills together, this program. And I was like, my mind was blown. I was so excited that there was this incredible resource available to our county. So.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm wondering if we might not go back and sort of visit that first set of thoughts that you had, because your context of ACEs, of adverse childhood experiences, is really central to the kinds of messages, ideas that we want to be sending out.
Absolutely. So, um, for some of you who may not know who I am the coordinator of the Chester County ACEs, or Adverse Childhood Experiences Coalition. And I've been spearheading this program in the county for about 8 years now. We're a program underneath the health department, and we're funded through some grant funding by CYF, for children, youth, and families here in the county. And so a lot of what I do is really educating and raising awareness around the impacts of ACEs, trauma, and toxic stress, because we know that all of these things impact not only our mental health, but our physical health as well. And throughout our lifespan, the stress that we experience as kids, we know can have some really unhealthy consequences later on in our lives. But another huge part of what we do is we're always trying to provide our community with tools, resources, strategies on how they can build their resilience. And we really understand that that's what we need to focus on, especially because many of us have experienced trauma, many of us experience stress all of the time. And so, how do we build resilience? How do we heal from some of the traumas that we may have experienced? And so, hearing this program for the first time, I was like, well, that's it, right? That's one of the ways that we can really kind
Yeah.
of address some of the stress that we have going on in our lives, some of the traumas we've been exposed to, and how we can build resilience in not only ourselves as parents, um, but also in the lives of our children. So, it was something that I really felt passionate about when I first learned about it. And I thought we have to do more with this program and we have to promote it in the county because again, it's just such an incredible resource that really goes hand in hand with what we do as a coalition.
Yeah, yeah. And so, sort of the flip side of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, is positive childhood experiences. And so that's I think one of the things that we're really trying to promote as
Yeah.
well in sort of suggesting activities, particularly for people.
For
Yeah,
sure. And something that, we do a lot of trainings and educational events throughout the county, and so many people come to us after our trainings or our workshops or any event that we host, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've learned about ACEs now, and I learned what it looks like as far as the impact that it may have on my life and generations, after me." And so many people are like, "What do we do now? What do we do now that we know
yeah,
about ACEs?"
yeah.
And this is something that we can now tell them. This is something that you can do. You can do this program. It is free, and it's something that's really going to help you and your family.
Yeah. So terrific. Now we can say that we're up to date, right? So um, one of the things that kind of happened, I think, in our talking back and forth, our doing the last meeting, is Chester County ACES Coalition works a lot with professionals, and we're sort of more targeted towards parents and carers. And yet, as we both started to think about it, there's a real role for the professionals as sort of an intermediary here.
Absolutely. And, as a coalition, we don't necessarily say, we don't have like a target audience.
Right.
Everybody's always like, oh, well, who's your target audience? Who are you trying to get this information out to? And we always say, like, anyone who lives and works here in
That's
Chester
it.
County
That's it.
needs to know this
Yes.
information because trauma impacts all of us. Whether we have experienced trauma, I would, I would say that probably all of us have experienced trauma now, given especially the COVID-19 pandemic. That was a collective
Yeah.
traumatic experience that we've all been through, and we all experienced it in varying ways, disproportionate ways, depending on the communities that we live in and that we're a part of. So, we've all been impacted by some sort of trauma, whether personally or, someone in our lives have been impacted by trauma. And so it's important for us to get this information out to everyone. However, the majority of the folks that really follow what we're doing and are always requesting trainings and that sort of thing are these professional audiences. We often get in front of social service professionals, nonprofit professionals, medical professionals. We have
Right.
a really great following in this space. And we felt as though, these people they're doing direct service with other families in our community. And we think it's really, really important for them to be aware of this tool, of this resource, and be able to tell their families that they're working with or the clients that they're working with, hey, what about this as a resource? Why don't you look into learning life skills together? Because it's really going to walk you through some of the skills that maybe they're already working on, or maybe they're already
Yeah.
thinking about working on. So when you and I had kind of talked and we looked at kind of both of our audiences and who, we have a larger following of, I felt, why not provide this information to professionals so that they can use it as a resource for the families and the clients that they work with. And so I'm really excited that we have an event coming up.
Yeah. And so here we have um, June 21st at 6 p.m., 6 to 8, and then the following day on the 22nd from 10 to 12, and then from 1 to 3, we'll be talking about learning life skills together through a couple of different lenses because to really serve all of the people that we both of our organizations want to serve, people need to understand, okay, from the point of view through the lens of the parents and carers, what is this program? But then through the lens of the professionals, what's underneath this program? Where did this come from? What's the evidence for it? How does it work? What are sort of the levers that you're pulling in humanness, And so that to me is really um kind of exciting because I've thought about this thing for 3 years now, and it's finally coming into focus and getting out there,
Yeah.
and to really be able to talk about how we've refined these ideas so that they can be really simple things. I mean, to make something simple is a very long process,
Yes,
you
you
know?
definitely had your work cut out,
Yeah.
but I know it's been a long and arduous process for you. And I'm so happy that you have really looked at some of these very deep concepts and theories, and you have been able to really simplify a lot of those for us as parents to be able to say, like, I need help now, and I need
Yeah.
tools and different on what I can do with my kids to help form a better connection with them, to help get them outside,
Right,
off
right.
of the screen, like, and to maybe help with um calming down maybe some of their nervous system. Like, what can we do in the moment? And that's why I think this program is so amazing for families, because it really does break it down very, very easily,
Yeah.
where you are able to say, okay, I can take what I've learned here because it's very simple, and I can apply that in my life without feeling like overwhelmed maybe by a lot of the concepts and the principles that kind of
E-
go behind it.
Exactly. There's a whole lot that the simple things that we offer rest on that I think the professionals should know about and should understand. But as parents and carers, you can come in, you can learn in 5-minute segments, things that you can do that help, things that you can share with your kids, things that you can do yourself, because that's one of these underlying unspoken things is, if you're doing the things that you're learning as a parent, you're changing how you relate to your children. You're changing the whole atmosphere in your family, in your household, however it's structured, whatever it's like. If the adults are doing these kinds of things that bring them more into emotional balance, that give them a chance to pause before they react and then choose how to respond. So often we don't take that beat and we don't make a choice. We just do what we do.
Right.
And to just be able to get underneath that.
Yeah. And
Um,
I think this program, when we talk a lot about trauma and ACEs prevention, one thing that really stands out, in the CDC, they list a few prevention strategies, but one of them is really, enhancing parenting skills and promoting a healthy start for children. And so I've said it before that when we became parents, we weren't given a guidebook. We didn't Nobody taught us like, oh, hey, this is how you can be the
Sure.
best parent you can be. We were just, you know, winging it, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
we're trying our best, many of us as parents. But I think what's interesting in that is that, again, I've talked a lot about how trauma is common, and so many of us have experienced it. And a lot of times we experience trauma and stress at the hands of our parents and our caregivers and the people who raised us. Trauma, we know now, it can be passed down from generation to
Uh,
generation. And so many of us have learned through the years and through growing up some of these really maybe unhealthy parenting styles. Um,
uh,
and so that's kind of all we know when we become
yeah.
parents. And it can be really, really challenging trying to figure out, different ways or to even notice maybe sometimes that, yeah, we responded in a not so great way. Maybe we should step back, take a breath, and really figure out what's going on in our bodies so that we can
Yeah.
best, address this situation with our child. There's so many things that as parents, I feel like we need to learn because a lot of us just weren't raised that way, right? We weren't raised being
That's
taught some of those
yeah.
skills. And unfortunately, we also don't, we go to school, but we don't get taught those things in school either. So
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
these skills and concepts that you teach through this program. Again, it's just really when we think about trauma and ACEs prevention, it sits beautifully in some of these
Yeah.
strategies because we really are through this program. You're teaching parents and carers, how to really enhance some of these parenting skills to make sure that their kids and themselves can
Yeah.
be as healthy as
Yeah.
possible, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if there's one thing that, that we're trying to get across, it's that if you stop for a moment and see what's actually going on, you can make choices. Now, we also help in, well, what might those choices be? You know, but the main skill is really to stop and notice. That was,
And
I
that
think,
can be
yeah,
so hard in
it
today's
is. It's very
society.
hard.
Oh, in today's society, we have so much going on. We have so much
Yeah,
pressure. We have, different schedules with the kids, and we have to go here and we have to go there. And then you just pile on top of that all of the other stress that we may have, going on in our lives. Maybe that personal stress, professional stress, if we have a lot of stuff going on at work. I mean, you just pile it all on top of each other. And I think it's really hard as a parent. And I'm speaking just, again, I'm a parent. And so I'm
yeah, I
speaking
know.
from my personal
Yeah,
experience that it's hard to just take a step back and say, I'm going to have this moment with my child and be very intentional about it. That can be very challenging. And so
yeah,
this program just really helps with, honing in on that and focusing and really, telling parents that no, this is where you're going to form those bonds and those connections with your kids. And these are the moments that really matter.
yeah, yeah. And so, learning life skills together has this word at the end, together, and it's not our program and it's you and your kids. I mean, that's the thing about it, is that our kids help us learn and continue these practices as much as we help by sharing with them. If you scrape it all the way back to infancy, right? And here's a carer with an infant, and the infant notices that she doesn't feel the way she would like to in that moment and responds, right, to her feeling. And so what do we do? How do we how do we work with that? Well, I mean, one of the things that we might do is to pick them up and hold them close to our beating heart, and we pat their backs. We sing to them. We do all these things which are calming, but they don't just calm the baby.
True.
Doing all those things calm us. And so what's really happening is we're calming ourselves while holding the baby. And our calm goes to the baby. And as we feel the baby get calmer and stop with the screaming already, we get it back. So it's coming in both directions. And that's true at any age, really. The way we work with our kids is we co-regulate each other. If we're not regulated, it's very hard for our kids to be regulated, but they do get better at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Especially if we model those skills to
yeah,
them too, and we use it as a teachable moment. I know, so often there's times where I can become overwhelmed and I can see it in my son's eyes, like, oh, wow, there's a lot
yeah.
going on here, Mom.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
being able to just say to them, like, hey, listen, I'm I have a lot going on right now. I'm a little overwhelmed. Why don't we take a few deep breaths? Some
that's
things
it.
like that. It's
That's it.
very,
Yeah,
very simple that we can just start implementing in our lives and be able to model to our children. And that not only, helps us with that co-regulation piece, but also building those relationships, building that trust between the two of you too,
yeah,
or the
yeah,
many children you have. But yeah, building that because then they can see that, oh, well, mom's telling the truth or mom's letting me know what's going on. And now I feel a little bit more safe.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that kind of thing is co-regulation is running underneath everything that we do, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about co-regulation. We don't talk about attachment theory and go deeply into it with the parents because when there where the rubber meets the road,
Yeah,
they
when it's
they
happening in
they
the
need
moment,
they need to do it now.
yeah, they're not
Yes.
thinking, oh, I need to co-regulate. They're thinking, no, no, I need to calm down and I
Yeah.
need to show my kid that I'm doing that too. And so what
Yes.
are those strategies and how
Yes,
can we do that,
that's
right?
that's where we want to be. And then, there's the professionals and they would like to know, okay, that's part of the theoretical basis of this. So, working on this for 3 years, essentially, day in and day out, and in my sleep sometimes, I've really tried to skinny it down to what are the really, really basic things that underlie it and that the professionals should know about and that I think about and make sure that we have the evidence to be saying, here's what you can do. We're not saying here's what you can do because it seems like a good idea or or it's something I did when my kid was 3.
No, there's actually
Yeah,
science
there's
behind it, right?
actually science here.
Yeah.
So one of the underpinnings, this is for professionals now. One of the theoretical underpinnings here is that there's there's a lot of commonality to the reasons for people's lack of mental health, shall we say. People who have anxiety at a disordered level, people who have depression at a disordered level. One thing that we know is going on is that they'd really rather not be having the experience that they're having. They would rather not feel the way they're feeling. And so we know that underlying things is avoiding our experiences. And that can be just by putting it out of mind, by pretending it's not there, or it can be by using substances and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a very basic human thing to not necessarily want to be where you are,
Right.
you know?
Avoiding the uncomfortable, right? Like
Yeah,
feeling,
avoiding what's uncomfortable.
yeah.
Exactly. And yet, there's this wonderful way that our brain works when we're in those stressful, difficult situations. And we do explain this to parents that there are parts of our brain that react just like that. Um, with fear, you react to threat, react, we lash out, we do what, or we completely withdraw, we do these kinds of things. And all of that happens in the very most primitive part of our brains, you know? And that's usually controlled by the very human parts of our brains, the part that can really think. And that part that really thinks, that the prefrontal cortex, right? People have heard of that. And it exerts executive control over the brain, right? We've all heard of executive function. That comes up in conversation. So that part of our brain keeps us calm when it's operating. But the thing is, when we start to feel all that stuff that we don't want to feel, that part of the brain goes offline, man. And, and we don't have that control anymore. And so off we go. So I mean, we know that about ourselves. We've had that happen to us and then we apologize, you know.
Yeah.
But with kids, it just goes.
Right.
Off it goes. So how do we come back? We come back by bringing that executive function part online, by being able to think again. So being able to use our words. What do we say to our kids that are screaming? Use your words. What's happening? That's not bull hockey or whatever. That's not just something that's made up. If you look at what's happening when I'm searching for words, when I'm using language, I'm using that part of my brain that's becoming stimulated, and it's calming the rest of my brain. So to say, honey, use your words isn't nonsense. It's absolute neuroscience, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you described it that way, Don, because like you said, it's science. There's science behind a lot of this. And when we do a lot of trainings, workshops, and educational, professional development opportunities. And we talk obviously a lot about childhood trauma and what that looks like. And we describe it kind of exactly how you were describing it, is that, when we experience some sort of threat, especially as kids, those parts of our brains just completely shut down. We can no longer logically think clearly or make rational decisions, think through something. We can't organize well. We just don't have those abilities because the part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex that is controlling all of that, it's completely shut down. So instead, we're in survival mode.
Ah,
And that, thinking about kids that are constantly in survival mode, they can't rationally think. They can't process what's going on. They just respond, right? They just kind of what we call flip their lid, right? So
right.
we're seeing a lot of really negative, sometimes negative behaviors on the outside. We're seeing some of those outbursts, or maybe they're completely just shutting down. Maybe they're disassociating with us. They're unable to focus in class. It's because a lot of these kids are stuck in that survival mode. And it's so hard for them to get out of it. And like you
Ah,
said, how can we help with pulling them out of that? It's giving them the words to express their feelings and being able to maybe just have them take a few deep breaths so that they can actually feel what's going on in their body.
that's the other part, that prefrontal cortex, the middle of the prefrontal cortex really likes to know how the body feels. And it's the last thing we want to do. That's the paradox, right? If we're willing to say, how am I feeling right now? What is that like? What's going on? That calms us. We don't think it's going to. We
Right.
think that I don't I don't even want to know about this. Get this away from me. And yet, if we can go there, it calms us down and we can be in reality and then make decisions and then, understand things, learn things, you know.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
it's
I think
really.
One thing that we see a lot of is that, parents, teachers, just general adults, when they see kids that are definitely completely dysregulated and are in kind of that survival or the fight, flight, or freeze mode, and we see some of these behaviors going on, that we ask kids to like make decisions, and that is
Yeah.
not the best. That's not the best thing because, as we said,
Yeah.
those parts of the brains are it's shut down.
Yeah.
So we really can't, we have to really focus on how we can regulate what's going on for this child. How can we get them back to what we call their window of tolerance when they
Exactly.
feel
Yeah.
safe and kind of at baseline, so that we're kind of bringing them out of that dysregulation and that we're able to say, okay, now the prefrontal cortex is back online. So let's talk through it now. But a lot of times, like, we see a lot of folks that just jump in and try to either have kids make decisions or talk through their problems in the moment, and it just unfortunately doesn't always work. So how
That
can we?
moment is not the appropriate one. Yes,
Not at all.
exactly.
Not at all. So getting them out
Yeah.
of that is really important, and this program really helps us with some of those skills to be
Yeah.
able to do that.
Yeah. And so those are two really basic things that just run through all of the things that we talk about. So we talk about paying attention, we talk about regulating our emotions and tolerating distress and being able to communicate. Those are the four skills that are the life skills, right? But then what we do is we put it into context and we say, okay, well, where can I go to do these and have positive childhood experiences? And so that also has a huge evidence base for it. So we say, go take a walk. Well, we know that getting exercise helps our mental health. We know, right, that being in nature helps us. We are natural creatures. We were just talking offline that, for the entire length of the existence of human beings, we've been outside almost all the time. We spend most of the day outside. In the last 200 years, it got to be like, oh, well, now I'm working in a factory and I'm not working in the field. So instead of being outside 90% of the time, I'm outside 50% of the time. Well, right now, we're at 90% of the time we're inside. We weren't built for that. And evolution has not caught up in 200 years to fix that for us.
We definitely need to get out
Yeah.
more. And listen, I know that it can be really hard, especially on some of these very hot and humid days where we're in like the 90s or seeing 100-degree temperatures. But
I like being in. Yeah.
yeah, so I
I
totally
get
get
it.
it. I get
I
it.
get it.
It's challenging. But what are some ways that we can really do that? Can we
Yeah.
take a walk after dinner at night when it starts to cool down
Yeah.
a little bit with
Yeah.
our family? Just a simple walk around the
Yeah.
block can really
Yeah.
help.
Some of
Um,
the some of the science even shows that if you watch pictures of nature, it gets us reoriented and re-regulated. So, there's this basic idea of let's go outside and have a pleasant experience. And so, obvious, underneath that is how can we limit screen time? How how can we get underneath that drive, you know? And so that's part of what's built into the program itself, is to be able to do that. And so, this idea that we belong in the world and belong to nature, and that we're creatures that accomplish things, that do things in the world. If you look at walking, um, experiencing awe, particularly nature, but the awe of humanity, the awe of people who do beautiful things. When your child runs up to you and gives you that card that they made for you, that is moral beauty, as the scientists would say, right? That just lifts us up and changes the whole way our body is and the whole way our our brain chemistry is. So to sort of work with those kinds of things, to be able to make things, to have agency in the world, even if it's making breakfast together. Hey, we made pancakes and we ate them. This is awesome. I did this, you know? And then finally, to belong, which is just huge and statistically dropping very quickly. We've been tracking that, I guess, really since the 70s and 80s, how much less people belong together in ways where we count on each other. Well, it's not that we don't, it's not that we're not related to each other in some way or another now, but we've
Yeah.
sort of lost a lot of that real deep investment in each other. And how do we recover that, and how do we give that back to our kids? That's part of the stuff that we're thinking about. So professionals, that's the kind of stuff that's underneath it all. And it is, there's more science than you could ever read, I'm sure.
Yes.
So,
Well, I was
yeah.
getting ready to say that, all of the resilience research really goes back to that feeling of belonging, relationships with people, having connections with folks that we know will protect us, that we feel safe by and we feel loved by.
Yes.
And that sense of community, I think, is something like you had said is kind of disappearing so much. We used to have these villages, that's what we used to say, right? Like to raise
Yeah.
a child, it takes a village. And we used to have all of these people around us, surrounding us in our lives that we can count on, we can rely on. We can say, hey, can you watch my child, or can you help me out with this, or whatever the case may be. And I feel like so often now we're kind of isolating
Yeah.
ourselves a little
Yeah.
bit more. And so we really need to get back to that connection because it truly can make all of the difference,
Yeah.
especially in the lives of children. So we have to make sure that they have positive role models in their lives, that they are connected at least to non-parent adults that just genuinely care
Mm,
about them.
yeah.
That
Sure.
in itself is actually one of the positive childhood experiences
Yeah. So
we're
important.
referring to earlier, Don.
Yeah.
And also, one of the other positive childhood experiences too is that feeling of belonging in high school.
Mm,
Actually, really important as well. And again, this research was done, pretty recently in 2019 by Johns Hopkins University. But that was one of these 7 positive childhood experiences that they said can make all of the difference. Is that if kids just feel like they belong in high school. They have a group of peer friends that they are connected with, um, and they feel like they belong to. So
yeah.
again, just really important things that this program really highlights.
Yeah. So we are coming up on our time here. And I just want to say again, for any professionals out there listening, that you can sign up through our website, which is lifeskillspa.org, and that the program runs tomorrow night, Friday night, on the 21st from 6 to 8, and then Saturday from 10 to 12 and 1 to 3. And if you are a social worker, licensed professional of really any ilk that falls under the social work license, that you can have 6 free continuing education units. Uh, so just think about that. Call somebody up, tell them, hey, you want six, because it's coming up in February of 25. You got to have them.
Gotta
So,
have those CEs. Yeah, so we
yeah,
really hope to see
yeah,
everyone. It's going to be a
yeah,
really great event. Looking forward to it, Don. And hopefully we get a great turnout because this is something I think all of the professionals here in Chester County that are working with families, they need to know exists, and they need to be able to promote this program to the families that they're working with.
I just think of the ripple effect.
For
You know, looking forward to seeing whoever shows up.
same.
Okay. Thanks so much, Chelsea.
Yeah, thank you, Don, for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.